What we hadn't done is actually voted on part 1. And I'm calling Porter Williams.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Chairman. Rise to take a call on part 2. There are several... well, this is actually the most substantial part of the bill. There are a couple of things that I want to raise in this contribution. One of the, this is kind of the technical operation of the bill, and one of the things that this bill does is it provides for the mechanism to make the application for the superannuation a little bit easier, so that if you are actually already resident in the Cooks at the age of 65, which is the age at which you can qualify for and apply for the superannuation, you can do so from the Realm Islands. You don't have to return to New Zealand to make that application and have it accepted. You can also, Mr Chairman, apply for the superannuation before the age of eligibility. It won't get paid to you until you reach the age of eligibility, but you can still have that application in place ready for when you do turn 65. The other thing this bill provides for is the checking mechanisms. In one of my earlier contributions, I talked about how my father would winter sometimes in the Cooks, and that he was required to come back to New Zealand, and that was part of the old checking mechanisms for New Zealand Super. But with this bill, you are now able to remain resident in the Cooks, Niue or Tokelau, and the ministry can check in with you, usually by writing, check in that your eligibility requirements are still in place. So it makes it a lot easier. It also provides for the application to stay live for a longer period of time, because let's face it, there are constraints around having documents sent in the mail, etc. So it just clears up some of those difficulties that some of the applicants may have had in the past. But also part of this part, sir, are those contentious eligibility requirements which we have already traversed quite a bit in the first part of the committee stage, but they are very relevant. And I want to reiterate what I see as the huge inequity in this, and that to qualify under this bill for 100% of New Zealand's superannuation, sir, you have to do twice as long residency in this country as any other New Zealander. So currently, under current superannuation laws, you can be resident in New Zealand for 10 years after the age of 20 and qualify for 100% of your superannuation. However, if you're going to apply from the islands of the realm, you have to be resident in New Zealand for 20 years to qualify for 100% of your super. Inequity number one, as I've already described. Inequity number two, the whole crux of the SOP and the real difficult part, and actually the part that the National Party Cook Island member could actually carve out as his contribution to our country. This is the nub of the matter, that you have to come back to New Zealand after the age of 50 and do 5 years residency here in order to qualify to collect your super. When I was talking to members of the Cook Island government about this earlier in the year, Mr Chairman, they said, why is that the case when, in order to qualify for New Zealand citizenship, you can be resident in the Cooks for 5 years? And in fact, I met a gentleman who was doing just that. In order to qualify for his New Zealand citizenship, he was resident in the Cook Islands. It makes no sense to me that you could have that requirement for New Zealand citizenship, but you could have a completely different requirement in order to collect the New Zealand super when you were already a citizen of this country. And the Minister did not explain well enough to me why that is the case. I don't understand why that is the case. It is blatantly unfair for a person who holds a New Zealand passport, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, it is blatantly unfair for someone who holds a New Zealand passport as a New Zealand citizen to be treated differently from another person who holds a New Zealand passport and is a New Zealand citizen. That is the crux of the argument with which the members of the opposition have so much disagreement about. The rest of the bill we completely agree with. The rest of the bill is great, and it actually provides an opportunity to have a discussion in this most important year for the Cook Islands, being 50 years that we celebrate being self-governing and free association with New Zealand. This is a great year, an important year, and I suspect the reason that we are actually debating this bill in the House is that it is a gift to the countries of the realm to have those things passed. However, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could actually do something that made a difference by removing that requirement for residency after the age of 50 for 5 years? There are a couple of other parts of this bill, Mr. Chairman, which have caused the veterans some difficulty. Now, that was the other submitter on the bill, the only one that didn't submit on the residency clauses. The submitter that spoke about the veterans' pension said very clearly that it was his belief and the belief of returned servicemen that veterans' pensions were not superannuation and that they should not be covered under the same bill. They should be treated separately because a veteran attracts the veterans' pension because of the service that they have given to our country and, put themselves at the ultimate risk in terms of fighting for our country. And I have to say that no one has actually picked up that part of the submitters tonight. So I want to honour that submitter who made that submission and say I understand what you were saying in that submission, that you were actually really wanting to differentiate. The submitter was wanting to differentiate between someone who collects a pension because they are of an age and someone who collects a pension because they've provided service to their country. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, just in conclusion, that this is an important piece of legislation for the countries of the realm, and I would again ask the Minister to please explain why, in terms of our citizenship, there is a different treatment for people who want to collect their super in the Cooks, Niue and Tokelau. We are citizens of New Zealand and we do hold New Zealand passports. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.